Forgot to hit the record button. Right, so what are some of the challenges? We saw how CO2 levels are increasing. The challenge is that with population growth and rising incomes, carbon emissions or CO2 emissions are continuing to rise, right? Especially in the developing world. Right, here's right, China is now the largest emitter of CO2 in the last couple of years. China overtook the United States, so China is the largest source of CO2 right now. But we in the United States, we have the largest cumulative emission. So 25% of the CO2 in the atmosphere is a result of us, a result of the United States. So we can't necessarily lecture to China and say, hey, you've got to fix the problem, right? The problem is largely still our doing. And here, more importantly, if we look at per capita, right, how much CO2 per person we see that are in the United States, our per capita consumption is right twice European and 3 times the world average, and 8 times India, 2.5 times China, right? So even though these other countries are starting to increase their carbon emissions, we in the United States, our per capita emissions are still very, very high, right? So countries, world leaders have been trying to find ways to solve this problem, right? These are difficult things. So at the end of the Obama administration, remember Barack Obama was president for 2 terms, right? His last term ended in 2016, so right near the end of his administration, he helped negotiate an agreement amongst world leaders where they said, we're going to set a goal of keeping, we want to keep temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius rise above pre-industrial levels. Ideally, we want to keep temperature rise to be less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Remember, a Celsius degree is bigger than a Fahrenheit degree, right? It was 85 degrees Fahrenheit today. So I'd have to look up, that's probably 25 degrees Celsius. So a lot of this stuff in global climate change is done in degrees Celsius. Right, so countries took a small first step, right, 2015, a couple of years ago now, 6 years ago, to try to deal with this problem. And then what happened in the United States, right, we elected a new president in 2016, President Trump, who said, oh, I don't believe in global climate change, and we're going to get out of that. That's a bad deal, right? So we joined, 2 or 3 other countries in the world who said, we're going to get out of the Paris Agreement. So since that time, right, again, I've been watching the news on this issue for many years as I've given this lecture. And, year after year, the scientists say, we have a problem, but we got to do something, right? This is in 2018. UN report says, hey, that 2 degrees Celsius target may not be aggressive enough, but we have to make dramatic changes in the world economy, right? If we're going to actually slow climate change, we got to make some big changes and make them fast, right? That's what the scientists have been telling us. Right, again, here's some information. Again, I think this is from 2018. Right, that the leaders met in Paris, they set goals, and people aren't meeting their goals, and those goals aren't aggressive enough to keep us below 2 degrees Celsius of warming. Right? That's true in the United States. We made pledges. There's our current emissions. We made pledges to reduce, and those pledges are far short of what is required. Ditto for China. Right? Again, world leaders, they have these conferences every couple of years. They met in 2019. They had every intention of strengthening some of the agreements made in Paris, and unfortunately, they were unable to do so. And again, if you're a climate geek like me, you watch the news. There was this young woman, Greta Thunberg, who, I think at the time she was maybe 16 or 17 years old, and she was trying to, shame world leaders into taking more aggressive action. Right? She said, "You folks are screwing things up. You're not fixing the problem. Look at the world that you're going to leave to me and my generation." And right, there was a youth climate strike. I think political action around the country at that time. And what happened in right early 2020, right? We ran into COVID. We're unfortunately still dealing with COVID. So this discussion of climate change and UN meetings all got put on the back burner and said, "Oh, we got to deal with COVID. So we'll set climate change for aside for the moment, and we'll deal with climate change." So hopefully, when COVID is behind us, as we know that it ultimately will we be able to focus again on climate change? Hopefully we will. The IPCC is the UN body that puts out periodic reports on the state of the science. Right? This is the experts, the scientists telling us, looking at the data and telling us what's going on. Right? The 6th report by this UN group. And, these, scientists are generally a pretty cautious lot. They like to be careful about, their choice of words. But this time around, just recently when they put up the report out, there was no doubt whatsoever as to who or what is responsible, right? This is a human-created problem, right? Human influence has unequivocally warmed the planet. Unequivocal, no doubt, right? There's scientific certainty that human influence is warming the atmosphere, the oceans, and the land, right? The fossil fuels that we're burning. Our science is getting better and better, right? We have more data. We have better computer models. We also have been doing what's called attribution research, right? The science is getting better at saying, okay, that Hurricane Ida, yeah, we've always had hurricanes, but now we can pinpoint that, yes, Hurricane Ida that strengthened from, in the space of a couple of days, strengthened into a Category 4 hurricane, that's due to climate change, right? We have better models, better data, better information. Because of all that CO2 that we put in the atmosphere, A lot of this warming is already baked in, right? We've already warmed the Earth about 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, right? Again, pre-industrial, before that industrial revolution, when the British figured out how to dig coal out of the ground and burn steam engines, right? We've already baked in a lot of climate change because of things that we've already done, right? So all the things that we're seeing, the droughts, the heat waves, the downpours, the flooding, the wildfires, that stuff is all going to get worse, right? It's not going to get better. It's going to continue to get worse. Global sea levels will continue to rise. We've baked all that change in. Right? All these things are happening rapidly. More extreme weather events, higher temperatures. But all hope is not lost. We still have a path. We still have a way that we can stay under our 1.5 degrees Celsius target. But to do so, we have to take dramatic action, and we have to take it very soon. And I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so here's some information from the IPCC report, and I always try when I make my slides to put the source of that information up there, so in case you want to go learn more about it, you can figure it out, right? So here's our upward trajectory and temperature, right? We've already warmed the planet 1.1 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels, and we're creeping up on our 1.5 degrees Celsius goal from Paris. So we have a couple different things we can do. We can radically reduce our CO2 emissions, or we can continue with business as usual. You know, we have a choice. If we figure out how to radically reduce our emissions, then we're going to creep into that 1.5 degrees and then maybe fall back again. Right? So if we take aggressive action now in this decade, we still have a chance. Then I saw this other report, right? Again, I'm always looking for ways of making this relevant to us in the construction industry, right? We're not atmospheric scientists, right? We're not global policymakers. You know, we're architects and designers and contractors, facility management people, right? That's what we do. That's what we're training you to do. So I looked for something that could bring this information down to something that was actionable for us in the construction business. Right, so I found this report by the International Energy Agency that says if we want to do these things that IPCC is telling us, right, we need to get to net zero. We need to zero out our carbon emissions by 2050, right? That's what this line is showing us. So net zero by 2050. So that's a formidable goal. That's a challenge, very difficult. But we'll show you the role that, again, we in the construction industry, things that we can do. So IPCC is saying we got to get to net zero emissions by 2050. Requires all governments to significantly strengthen and then successfully implement their climate and energy policies, right? So we got to set more aggressive goals, and then we have to have the actual policies that implement those goals, right? So just having You know, having platitudes, saying nice words is not going to get the job done. We got to roll up our sleeves and make serious changes. Right? So the next decade is critical, right? We have to turn the ship around between now and 2030, right? That's just over, that's 8 years, just over 8 years, right? Lots got to happen in the next 8 years. We want to get to 50% reduction by 2050. I'm watching the clock here because I still got a few more things we want to do. Right, the good news is that we've seen a tremendous drop in the cost of renewable technologies, right? Tyler can probably tell us about how much cheaper photovoltaic cells are now, both PV panels now, over what they were a couple of years ago, right? So we're getting to the point where the technologies required to do this are becoming feasible. Right, here's what I liked, right? We don't have to, all the technologies needed to achieve the necessary deep cuts in the global emissions by 2030 already exist. And the policies that can drive their deployment are already proven, right? We don't have to wait for something magical to get invented. Or we don't have to wait for someone to figure out the widget, right? All the things that we need already exist, right? We have windmills, we have photovoltaics, we have insulation, we have high performance glazing systems, right? We know how to do all the things that are necessary to do. We just have, now we have to get out and start doing them. So the IEA, this report had different swim lanes for things that happened in different industries. So the little green swim lane here is buildings, right? That's us. Buildings is construction professionals. Those are the things that we do or that we can do. So I looked at some of the things that they say that we have to do in our swim lane, right? So we have to stop putting new fossil fuel in buildings by 2025, right? What does that mean, right? It means that we're not going to use natural gas in our boilers. We're not going to have gas stoves and ovens, right? When we build new buildings, we're not going to put fossil fuels in them. So all new buildings are net zero ready by 2030, right? Net zero means that that building is so efficient that on-site renewables can provide the energy that's needed, right? Again, these are things that we in the construction industry, this is in our swim lane, right? So if we do our part, we can get to a 50% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030. We're going to start moving, right? All 2035, most appliances and cooling systems are best in class, so we have to put the best, most efficient equipment in the buildings that we design and build. Here's the challenge that I see: 50% of existing buildings retrofitted to zero carbon ready levels, right? We have, you know, we're going to be building some new buildings, but we have this tremendous stock of existing buildings that we have to figure out how to retrofit to get the energy consumption of those buildings down, right? But this is what we do, right? We're construction professionals. This is our swim lane. More than 85% of buildings are zero carbon ready by 2050, right? So we got to figure out how we're going to make the existing stock of buildings radically more efficient, right? And that gets us to net zero by 2050. I won't be around in 2050, but you will, right? This is your career. This is what you folks are going to be doing here for the better part of your careers. You're going to be figuring out how to do all this stuff, right? These are actions that we as construction professionals can play a major role in achieving, right? This is us. This is our swim lane. Right, so here's our Here's our current President Biden. I don't know about, I certainly breathed a huge sigh of relief as a person who cares about the climate when this cat got elected, or when his election was ratified. Right? He said that, okay, I know we had the previous guy, Trump, got out of a lot of these agreements, but I'm going to get back in. Right? We're going to make this important. Unfortunately, these G7, right? These developed countries, they made some promises, but yet they still have failed to live up to all those promises that they made. And I'm going to play a quick video here, which I should have teed up.
Starting in the 50s.
Sorry about that. I spent my break time looking for the cats rather than teeing up my next set of videos. So let me play one here, and that'll take us just over the end of our class time. Right, why is it? This is addressing the question of why is there doubt about the science, right? Why do we have a lot of people that are still climate deniers? Why do a lot of people not believe the science? So let's play this.
With the wave of public concern about smoking causing cancer, the tobacco companies developed a very sophisticated, probably the most sophisticated effort to confuse the public about science, to confuse scientists about science. And now we've seen a lot of the same people, in fact, have gone over to becoming climate deniers, using exactly the same kinds of strategies.
I didn't think that we'd have a chance of getting, anyone to go to the theater to go see a film about climate change, because Al Gore's already made a film about climate change.
If you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured, they've all occurred in the last 14 years. And the hottest of all was 2005.
And the one thing we've learned is when you explain science to people, it hardens those who don't believe in the science. So it became a film about doubters and how people are able to stop us from believing inconvenient science.
In March 2015, director Robert Kenner will attempt what no one else has successfully done since An Inconvenient Truth: debut a successful documentary about climate change.
The tobacco companies knew nicotine was an addictive drug, yet they told Congress,
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
You see the same small group of people that the tobacco industry used working on all kinds of other issues.
Dioxins, pesticides, chemicals in general. I mean, there's no evidence that these are harming us.
And tobacco is a great metaphor because we know those are lies.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive. I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And and when we start to see a lot of those people are the same people, and a lot of the arguments are the same arguments, it makes it a little easier to say, hey, maybe we're being lied to about other things, including energy.
The movie Merchants of Doubt is based on the book by Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway.
A key part of the strategy from the very beginning is to undermine the idea of scientific consensus. And one of the things they discovered in their own market research was that if you can persuade people that there's no scientific consensus, then people will think that it would be premature to act. So it's a very, very powerful strategy that we know works. And this is why you hear them saying as a kind of mantra, there's no consensus, the science isn't settled, we have experts who don't agree, there's still a lot of uncertainty, there's considerable uncertainty. You hear this phrase, considerable uncertainty, repeated over and over again.
Science historian Naomi Oreskes authored a high-profile paper detailing the overwhelming scientific consensus on human-caused climate change.
So the paper essentially just says that if you look at what scientific experts have to say on the subject of whether or not climate change is underway and whether it's mostly caused by human activities, the scientific community is clear the answer to that question is yes. And so the paper was simply just saying that. That's it. That was the whole thing, nothing more. Yes, this is what scientists have to say.
What was the response to the paper after it came out?
Well, that's when I started getting attacked. And that was when life sort of changed. It was a bit like, going through the looking glass. And one of my colleagues at Scripps, at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, said to me, you should talk to Ben Santer. Something sort of similar happened to him.
Ben Santer, a senior atmospheric scientist at Livermore National Labs, was a key author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report in 1995. It was Santer who crafted the carefully worded key passage in the document, announcing for the first time that the balance of scientific evidence suggests a discernible human influence on global climate.
So my life changed. Lots of people didn't like that balance of evidence statement, and no personal animus, but I was the carrier of that message. So you take down the message by taking down the messenger.
Ben told me what had happened to him, and then the pieces began to come together because one of the people who had attacked Ben Santer was Fred Singer, and he was one of the people who was attacking me.
The science around secondhand smoke hyped the science around the ozone layer, hyped going back 10, 15, 20 years.
I'm happy to discuss all of these since I've been deeply involved in these topics that you mentioned. Let me start with secondhand smoke.
When I was in graduate school, I worked on stratospheric ozone depletion. And Fred would call me when I was in grad school and talk to me about how he didn't think humans were depleting ozone. And before that, he had real questions about whether humans were causing acid rain. He really criticized the work that connected secondhand smoke to health impacts. And now he doesn't think global warming is an issue.
So in 1995, you characterized secondhand smoke as a myth. You guys put out a press release on environmental myths in 1995. Documents in the Tobacco Legacy Library they got from all of the lawsuits over the tobacco companies, where a lot of this stuff has come out. And they say in there that they're extremely happy with your performance on this. This is from Brown and Williamson, and how they were arranging for media interviews for you, and you're doing and so you did a big media, when you released this press release about myths, you did this big media study. What are your views today on secondhand smoke? Do you think secondhand smoke is a carcinogen?
How would I know? I'm no expert on cancer, and I don't know what's in secondhand smoke. I'm not a chemical toxicologist.
I remember that day, I called Eric on the phone and I said, Eric, we need to write a book.
Actually, I spoke to someone who was the Winston man, and he said when he was on the set, he asked the tobacco executives, do you guys smoke? And they said, no, that's for poor people, that's for stupid people, that's for black people. We don't touch the stuff. Listen, that was a difficult job to know they had a product that caused cancer and was addictive, and to be able to keep selling it and to keep the question alive whether this is bad for you. That's not an easy job, but that is the playbook. And they develop a playbook saying doubt is our product. Just create doubt, keep going. And at the same time, this small group of people, when the tobacco money dried up, they went to new products. And today the big payday is energy.
Okay, folks, sorry that we went a couple minutes over time here and I didn't quite get to the end of my slides, but let me find what we were talking about here. Right, so we've had scientists telling us, right, the one guy said in 1995, the balance of evidence was that this is a human-caused problem, right? So we've had people questioning the science now for, what, 25, 26 years or more. And unfortunately, vested interests have manipulated public opinion and the scientific process to create doubt and delay action, right? That's how we find ourselves in the position that we are in, right? We've failed to take action for 25 or 30 years when we've known that this is a serious problem, and now we're in a situation where we have to make drastic changes in the next decade. One more set of slides. Right? Are we responsible? Are human beings responsible for this problem? I think so. I think if you put these two slides next to each other, you look at graphs of CO2 emissions, right? They use the term anthropogenic. Anthropogenic means caused by human beings. If we look at CO2 emissions and carbon emissions and CO2 levels, there's almost a direct correlation between the two. So to me, it's pretty clear that this is us, this is our problem, and we got to fix it. Okay, gotten to the end of class here. I'm going to pick up. I got a couple slides and one other video that I didn't get to tonight, so we'll pick that up at the top of class. Check on Blackboard. I put up something called under course materials. I put up something in called the knowledge sharing assignment. We'll talk about that more next week. Any questions? Okay, well, I hope some folks are still out there. Again, what I was trying to do, and we'll hit on it again at the top of the next class, is yes, this is, you know, a lot of science that's a little bit complicated. But the point to me is that we in our business, we as construction professionals have a very clear set of things that we need to be working on, things that we can do. They're in our swim lane. They're within our power. So what I'm going to try to do this semester is help you learn as much as we can about these things so we can play our part in addressing this issue. Any questions?
Is there any homework listed on Blackboard?
You'll have to go and look. There is we're in week number 3. I think I have a discussion board assignment that's there. It should be up on Blackboard. I'll double check that it's there. It's basically just like the discussion board that we did a couple weeks ago. In this case, you're going to read an article and comment upon it and comment on other people's posts. So that's up there, and also there we're reading some chapters in the, let me find my textbook here. Right, our lead textbook, right? That's the required textbook for the course. I'm having you read some chapters in there. So when we get around to talking about lead next week, you'll have the background knowledge to understand what I'm talking about. So yes, that information is up on Blackboard. So please look at Blackboard under course materials. I have things mapped out there, and they're in line with what's in the syllabus. Anything else, folks?
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I know it's, yes, terrifying is probably a good word, Taylor, but it's the reality and we have to deal with it, right? We have to do our part. Oh, Bay, I forgot about you. We'll do it at the top of next class. My apologies.